You're live.
Okay, rested. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the April meeting of the Curriculum Committee. We have special guests here today. We have Ms. Lori Director from our Guidance Department, and Dr. Feeney, our liaison, and of course, Dr. Hines. And my committee members, Ms. Brooks and Dr. Blotcher. Thank you for joining us. We will be discussing our guidance department and social and emotional learning. So without further ado, we always run late, so let's get straight to it. Thank you, Dr. Feeney and Ms. Director.
Thank you. For over the course of this presentation, what we will see are some of the initiatives we have as a district on SEL. SEL is something that New York State has emphasized, national organizations have emphasized. I think it poured into a lot of individual pieces of SEL, what we're trying to do with Ms. Director and our principals is try to unify it a little more, create a little more coherence to make sure there's a consistent SEL experience, K through 12. So the presentation you'll see is in many ways our SEL work is a work in progress across the district, but we do have a lot to highlight that teachers have been doing, counselors have been doing. I think what's new over the last few years is trying to create a little more coherence. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Director.
Thank you, Dr. Feeney. Thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be here this morning, and Dr. Hines, of course. I'm very excited to present this to you today. As Dr. Feeney just said, this has been a result of a conversation we've been having all year. So this morning's topics that we will go over today, I'll give you a bit of a history and an overview of social emotional learning in New York State, what that has looked like over the last few years. I'd like to give you, again, an overview of our multi-tier system of support, which is how we offer delivery of our systems in academics and in social emotional learning. Then we're going to talk about our overview of what social emotional learning in Port Washington currently looks like, including a look at each building, at each school. We'll summarize the key points of what we've gone over in the delivery and wrap it up with some next steps and planned initiatives. Social emotional learning is the process through which children, youth, and adults acquire and effectively apply the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. Now, this comes from the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, otherwise known as CASEL, which I'm sure you've all heard of. And they identify the 5 core competencies that you see in the middle of that circle there. So as you expand in the circle, you see that everyone plays a role in the competencies of self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. So in 2018, the New York State Board of Regents provided recommendations to local school districts on the implementation of SEL learning benchmarks, policies, and programs. And they aligned this with CASEL, and through their partnership, New York State developed guidance for districts to develop their own SEL plans based on a common framework. So as you can see by the information on the slide, I've also just highlighted some points on how social emotional learning in school promotes high student achievement and development of the whole child. So here's an in-depth look. I will not read this, but these are the 5 social emotional learning competencies that I just shared with you in the CASEL review. So CASEL's inclusion of the word learning in social emotional learning is purposeful and designed to reflect the fact that the acquisition of the skills and attitudes within the 5 competency domains is a process, which we know as our students have gone from K through 12 and have learned in the classrooms. Schools are one of the primary places where social emotional learning takes place. The emphasis on learning is bolstered by more than 3 decades of brain research on neuroplasticity and the ability of all individuals to engage in lifelong learning. New York State Ed identified 3 overall goals for students to achieve at all public schools in the state, and these goals align with the CASEL competencies you just saw. So these next 2 slides, I'm going to go over the benchmarks that New York State created. There were 2 versions of this. This is the 2018 version, where you can see that they designed the benchmarks where students take ownership of self-awareness and self-management, social awareness. Again, these are those competencies you saw in that wheel. And now I want you to see the 2022 revision, which was created with an equity lens. So keep in mind that when this revision was introduced and rolled out to districts, we were already in the process of our NYU equity work. And the reason I bring this up to you today is because I want you to understand that we were already using culturally responsive practices or introducing that and rolling that out to our district members in advance of the revised benchmarks. We've included, so this QR code will have a folder with some articles and this literature to share with you when this is posted. Social emotional learning has a positive impact on the entire educational environment. These next 2 slides highlight 2 of those areas: school climate and approaches to discipline. When social emotional learning is infused in the learning environment, it results in increased student, parent, and faculty engagement. All members of the learning community feel that their contributions are valued and appreciated. School culture is also improved with the diversity of cultures, languages, and experiences SEL provides. Social emotional learning also benefits our approaches to discipline. SEL embraces a restorative rather than a punitive approach to discipline. Restorative practices focus on relationships and school culture. When restorative practices are used, disciplinary matters decrease. A recent article in NEA Today reported that Chicago Public Schools experienced a 35% reduction in student arrests in school over a 10-year period when those restorative practices were used. That QR code there can be used for further reference, and that will also be put in that folder. So the reason school climate and approaches to discipline were highlighted on these 2 slides, because these align with 2 of our important district goals this year surrounding school climate work and our code of conduct. SEL is an important component of our code of conduct and those school climate initiatives this year. So here's our multi-tiered system of support image that I know we've all seen. But SEL is also delivered within a multi-tiered system of support. As with response to intervention, social emotional learning and positive behavioral interventions and supports enable schools to proactively provide universal interventions for all students and to customize interventions that address academic and behavioral challenges for at-risk students and high-need students. It is an important means of addressing equity and, most importantly, ensures that all young people are provided with the kinds of supports they need to thrive. The SEL plan focuses on a multi-tiered system of support to provide instruction and a foundation to offer more targeted interventions when needed. The goal is to support and advocate for students, family, and staff. And we can only do this through looking at data analysis, through collaboration, connection, that homeschool connection, and work within faculty, administrators, and the community. So let's take a look now at social emotional learning in Port Washington. So we've got our castle wheel again, and this time I have it next to our portrait of a graduate. I wanted you to just see how those 5 core competencies align with the medallions of our core medallions that make up our portrait of a graduate. And I think you can see the connections between how those competencies fit within each one of our goals. So let's talk a little bit about that foundation for our SEL work. And as Dr. Feeney mentioned a little while ago, so much of this work is being done Some of this work has been started and we seek to expand this. So New York State encourages districts to incorporate restorative practices in district's SEL delivery. We're building our SEL practices around two approaches: ruler at the elementary level and restorative practices at the secondary level. So just know that these two are not mutually exclusive, and there are certain benchmarks within the two that align with one another. Our elementary ruler initiative has had a tremendous impact on our students, staff, and families, and we believe that restorative practices at the secondary level will take that learning to the next level. So ruler, as we know, is an evidence-based approach to social and emotional learning that supports the entire community in understanding the value of emotions, building emotional intelligence skills, and creating and maintaining positive climates. Restorative practices foster deeper connections among school communities. At the secondary level, students can build their foundation of emotional intelligence formed through ruler. So what we did earlier this year, in January and February, a team of faculty, administrators, students, and parents participated in a 4-day-long training in restorative practices that gave us the foundation, and then some. It was a robust training. We all walked away feeling confident and turnkey those concepts back to our buildings and departments. So since that time, the restorative practices concepts have been introduced to faculty members, and in some cases have been used even with some students. Restorative practices can give learning communities opportunities for all voices to be heard. It promotes accountability, inclusion, and the building of relationships. Students' emotional intelligence will continue to grow along with their connections to trusted adults at Weber and Schreiber. So in a moment, I'm going to share more about what's happening in each one of our schools, but it's important here to note that we have some common SEL themes district-wide. So these are some of the district-wide initiatives that we've embarked upon this year. Analysis from the panorama surveys have informed some of these initiatives. Relationships and connections are highlighted as some of the areas we focus, so that drove these decisions. And at each building and district level, a team approach is used for implementation. So you can see here, we've got examples that reach out into the community, including the book talks, community outreach. We have a thriving network, our outreach committee that has been working with school personnel and various entities within the community have helped to support our students and families. And much of this, again, was driven by the data that was collected in our panorama surveys. Okay, so this slide here, you can see an overview of what's happening at each elementary school. Before I dive deeper into each building itself, this is what's taking place at the elementary level. So I put into ruler, we know has been used robustly over the last few years. Each one of the elementary, whether it was an administrator or a counselor or a teacher who participated in restorative practices, have introduced concepts from that back to their schools. Every school has a character education initiative. There's community outreach. As you know, the counselors all collaborate on a parent university once a year. They have a counseling newsletter that informs families of what is happening in the department and often provides much needed resources. They also participate in spirit weeks, name calling weeks, and each one has a career day. So now let's take a look at the buildings themselves. So Daly has started to roll out restorative practices with faculty and with some classes. It was introduced at a faculty meeting, and those that felt comfortable were able to take that and to be used with some of their students. They also have an initiative called What If Wednesdays, where students apply critical thinking to imaginary social scenarios. So every Wednesday morning during announcements, a social thinking conflict is announced. That conflict is explained, and students in their classes discuss the situation and problem solve as a group. Students use skills in conflict resolution, leadership, and ethical decision-making. Fifth graders do play a prominent role in this initiative. And at our daily pre-K, our youngest students learn the foundation of emotional vocabulary. Students learn about kindness and respect, and center-based activities give students the opportunity to learn the words associated with emotions. Here you can see them in a color monster and mood meter lesson. And here you have some examples of Daly's coping skills, feeling words, and what if Wednesday board. So I think they're all remarkable. The coping skills and feeling words tied to the alphabet, I think are remarkable for students to have this each day. Equally as remarkable, this is an image of Guggenheim Elementary School's Legacy Project for 2023-24. It is a mosaic created by each faculty member who is associated with fifth grade and each fifth grader. So Guggenheim links up with the Ben's Bells organization, which is that Be Kind logo in the lower bottom. That is another organization that strives towards kindness and caring towards others. And this year, their theme, Guggenheim's overall theme is Be the Change You Wish to See in the World. So they created this mosaic as their legacy project, and this hangs at Guggenheim. So all year long, students can also earn Guggenheim kindness coins. They're super sweet. Students can get coins to be traded in at Smushed, or perhaps for other tokens of appreciation and at Guggenheim. So the best part about that initiative is that students are actually encouraged to pay it forward rather than to cash them in themselves. So students at Guggenheim are doing acts of kindness all year long to promote a healthy school climate. And at Manor Haven Elementary School, they are simply marvelous with their Manor Haven marbles. In AOK December, students perform acts of kindness because AOK stands for Acts of Kindness, and they participate in kindness initiatives all month long. Manor Haven is also one of 2 schools in the district that participates in PS I Love You Day. PS I Love You Day is a day that promotes kindness, caring, and anti-bullying. It takes place the first Friday in February, and people are reminded that love is all around them on PS I Love You Day. So at Salem Elementary School, Salem Rocks is the theme for their character ed and PBIS program. Rocks is Salem is respectful, they do outreach, they are caring, they perform kindness and sensitivity acts towards one another. And when students are caught doing something kind, they are look who rocks, and they can add a rock to a special Salem bulletin board, Salem Rocks bulletin board in the cafeteria. So fifth graders again take a prominent leadership position at Salem. They read the mood meter color of the week. They give examples of what words are associated with that color. They also read positive affirmations and daily announcements. The positive affirmations, when students hear them, each class can participate in that positive affirmation, consider an example that goes along with it, and then they also have an opportunity to post their answers to a board. Another thing, so Salem's ruler team also has students think about their various emotional vocabulary words. Students get to research the definition, put the word into a sentence, and then they get to announce that sentence and an example of that on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And Salem also keeps a mood meter in the cafeteria. So if they get selected and it is announced, they get to add it to that board. Okay, so Sousa we know is a ruler, mentor, and spotlight school. Earlier this year, Ms. Sheehan and Mrs. Johnson presented at the annual Ruler Conference. Sousa hosted another Ruler Family Night and celebrated the Ruler Recharge Day. At Sousa, they also have the Principals 200 Club and Charter Champions. And as a result of Charter Champions, students can also earn Smush coins, which Smush did give a generous donation to schools this year. And they also can earn extra time with Hudson. Okay, so did I mention Hudson?
I wouldn't have extra time.
So, yes.
Dogs of your own.
Susan participates in Kelso's Choices, which is a conflict management and character education solution. Letters are sent home from the counselor and administration to families to foster that homeschool connection. So here we have a slide, some pictures of the team at Yale Ruler. And this is what the charter champion looks like when students are found doing something that promotes the school's charter or the class charter. They get to fill one of these out and then earn a spot on that principal's 200 club board. Okay, so at the secondary level, we see the introduction of health teachers and a mental health team that includes school counselors, school social workers, and school psychologists. So as we know, school counselors and school psychologists are present at the elementary schools. Our secondary level has school social workers that join the team. We also see some increased student engagement through clubs and activities, and students start to become more autonomous with creating and driving the decisions around those clubs. At Weber Middle School, the health teachers play an important role in delivering SEL to students at the secondary level. So the health curriculum includes topics to support students' growth and development that is appropriate to the middle school level. So in both levels, when students are entering into the 6th grade, and you'll see in a moment this will also happen in the 9th grade, where health teachers do impress upon the students and teach them who are the supports in their building, where can they go when they need help, who can they turn to, who are the trusted adults. So teaching students about decisions and resources is a very important part of the entering 6th grade and 9th grade health curriculum. So Weber's delivery of SEL begins before the students start 6th grade. Administration and faculty members are thinking about that orientation, that 5th grade to 6th grade orientation and articulation long before the 6th graders arrive at Weber. And it truly is essential to a successful start of the school year. The initiatives that you see in front of you here are a collaboration between the social workers, the counselors, and the faculty members and administration at Weber Middle School. So I purposely put 6th grade orientation at the top, and at the bottom is the Weber walk up to Shriver when those 8th graders do that ceremonious walk across campus and up campus drive to the high school.
So,
Yes. Okay, here we have some pictures. These are some great pictures that were shared that depict PS I Love You Day, where the students took part. Those messages on the bottom left, those are all caring and kindness messages that the students can post on a heart-shaped Post-it and put on a board. You can see some faculty members on the lower, so counselors and social workers, and some of our students taking part in messages of kindness. And here, we've got some slides from some of our character ed groups at Weber. So you can see that they're doing some team building exercises here that promote social skills thinking and problem solving. So we have now made our way up to Shriver. I already mentioned and gave a little bit of a teaser about health in the 9th grade. But we are one of the few districts fortunate enough to offer health 2 times in the high school. The 9th grade curriculum is focused on 3 topics. So again, those mental health resources at Shriver, which help students feel a sense of belonging. Who is your trusted adult? They also talk about clubs and activities and the importance of getting involved. There's a personal responsibility unit where students learn about ways that they can be accountable and to build relationships and good habits in high school. And a wellness unit that focuses on mental wellness, physical wellness, nutrition, anything that they need to build a healthy foundation and to be mentally healthy. So the graduation requirement for health is offered in junior year for students. Focuses on taking care of oneself and others. So really what's encompassed in that topic includes optimizing their mental and emotional health. As we know, junior and senior year, the stakes get a little bit higher for students. Knowing what triggers their own stress and taking care of knowing their coping strategies to manage their stress, a sleep assessment and sleep management, positive communication techniques, depression and suicide prevention, body image awareness, and understanding mental illnesses. So Schreiber also, like Weber and the other schools, this slide here would show that the collaboration between counselors, social workers, psychologists, and faculty members in some of the SEL initiatives that are offered. Starting from Bagels and Lots and freshman groups. Bagels and Lots is run with counselors and building administration, and those freshman groups, which we have enhanced over the last couple of years to include a bit more of students get an understanding about who they are as learners and who they are as students. Our social workers one of our social workers offers an E&L Fall Parent Workshop, which is a series of 12 workshops for our families, and the topics are anywhere from social emotional to understanding the college application process, and it's done to support our families who are whose English is not their primary language. The Counselor Connection newsletter, which again enforces that homeschool connection. Our Full Support Club is a club created and run by our students, but with Ms. Larissa Renard is the faculty advisor who actually supplied that picture of the meeps up at the top. So when we come back to Schreiber in a week and a half, we will be beginning Mental Health Awareness Month. And these meeps are for sale for the Full Support Club, and they will be donating that to charity, the proceeds from this. But these, again, are just to remind you that there's somebody out there that cares about you. So,
Can you spell that? What on earth is
it is a MEEP, MEEPS.
Okay, and why do we call them that?
I don't know that it stands for anything, but I think it's Mrs. Bernard can explain a bit more.
Okay.
But the timeliness of her sharing that photo was perfect for this. Another really exciting thing two really exciting things that have happened recently. Just last week, we were able to bring a group of students who have not yet visited a college campus to see Mercer University and Student Purchase. So two of our counselors took a group of students up there. They had an incredible day. They absolutely loved it. They were treated very, very well. They got to know what it's like to eat in the student commons. They got to meet prominent people on campus, and it was a great day. We also had our first faculty administration student wellness day, and I will show you pictures of that in a moment. That was a really great day, put together through ideas from faculty members, from students, who all decided they wanted to run a certain wellness activity. So you had, we were supposed to have people playing tennis outside and running, but the weather wasn't great. And then you'll see in a second where I spent much of my time. So my favorite part was the therapy dogs and the animals, if you can see what we have there. But also I've included here on the upper left, that is a photo from our recent Viking Ventures Career Series, where we had a speaker from Malloy University come in and speak to students about social work. So here they're putting together a project, again, that involved leadership skills, problem solving. And the two pictures on the bottom, the center and the right, those two pictures are from those campus visits. So, what you've just seen, to summarize, okay, so as we talked about, SEL in Port Washington aligns with the New York State benchmarks and the portrait of a graduate. However, our secondary level SEL is, some of our initiatives are emerging at this point, so we're talking about ways to expand that. They also align with the Board of Education and Superintendent's goals for 2023 to 24 as I pointed out earlier, with school climate and with the code of conduct. We absolutely must have collaboration between faculty, administration, parents, and community members for SEL to be successful. An ongoing data analysis of our initiatives will continue to inform us of our trends, strengths, and area of improvement, and that will be through our panorama climate surveys. So our next steps, what are the steps that we hope moving forward? So we'll continue to evaluate our SEL initiatives, both in the buildings, in each school, and in the district. And enhancing community partnerships, so our proposed partnerships with Northwell Health, executive functioning, and our additional restorative practices training. We are hoping to train an additional 50 members next year, so that we can have more people involved. And finally, to develop a district SEL plan to formalize this and have this access on our website for all stakeholders to be able to see how we are incorporating SEL in Port Washington.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a lot, but then your last little nugget is kind of my overall theme, and what I'm always wanting to be able to have committee members go first.
You want to go first?
So do you.
I have one question. So thank you for the presentation. It's really nice to see what's happening. What I really like about the presentation is seeing what's happening in all the buildings, and seeing the commonalities and some of the uniquenesses. The words that I did not hear that I wanted to ask about are, particularly at the secondary level, are social media. And so I just wanted to hear what was being done, primarily at the secondary level to train kids, because I would think that social media is almost a gateway for many of these problems to occur. But I didn't hear it being discussed, so I just wanted to hear what sorts of trainings or preparation students are being provided to as they enter the age of being on board social media.
That's an excellent point, and I know that this was brought up in a parent university this year, where Dr. Baer had hosted a workshop on somebody to talk about social media. It was attended by a few parents, and the hope is that we can continue that. We also, in our safety and substance abuse task force, brought in someone who has a digital citizenship and substance abuse. It's not only just a curriculum, but they also do some professional development on that work. So we have to do more on getting more formalized digital citizenship. But these are conversations that we're having with Dr. Baer and the administrators about how we can get that. But that would all be a part of enhancing and helping this grow, because we have to do that work. It is in the health curriculum, but I think there are ways to do more of that.
Okay.
If I can add in, I think to your point, and I'm sure Jonathan Hayden spoke about the anxious generation, which is outstanding, discusses in depth, and no longer sort of anecdotally, but he supports it with research and studies and data, that there has been a rewiring of an entire generation's mind because of these devices, and especially because of social media platforms and what they've done. And this is stuff that Dr. Hines was talking about, the need for play, over a decade ago, and the movement of kids' lives from outdoors and playing to indoors phone play has changed their brains. And it's been out there. Different researchers have sort of put it out there, but the evidence and the data supporting this dramatic change is clearer and clearer. And he discusses this in that new book. I think we discussed it the high school level, district level, it is something that is a serious issue.
I mean, I'm thinking in terms of something as simple as, etiquette that I don't even, know what the right thing to do is when it's like, people are posting photos about their lives. They went to a party, not everybody in their class was invited, right? Because that's how it goes. And, understanding the impact of whether to do that or whether not to, who to ask, and, just like some, standard common practices so that people can feel good about sharing events about their lives without feeling exclusionary. Like, I feel like a whole bunch of folks have different perspectives on it. So I'd just love to hear, think about ways that we could like educate them in the same way that they can balance, sharing about their lives with their friends while they don't make others feel excluded.
There was a time, in the way back world, the old lady at the table, the middle school was discussing a lot the issues of students coming in with sweatshirts from parties from the weekend, et cetera. So that was a very hot topic. I haven't heard pretty much anything about it in years, but it was pre-social media. That was the social media when you walked in with your sweatshirt. So it's just another version of that, I guess.
And before that, it was at the lunchroom table where kids would come in and say, oh, did you go to such and such a party? I mean, it's just taken on a new form, and I think maybe a more insidious form because it's so immediate and so everywhere. So in other words, you can see it so much more readily. It's much, that information is more available.
That was I had one question.
I just wanted to piggyback, so Dr. Hines, I sent that email to you about Jonathan, and that in one night, he was on both Firing Line with Margaret Hoover and Bill Maher. And written up in the, yes, sorry, I realized his last name. And so, just literally in one night, almost back to back, on two completely stations, and so the message is obviously very prevalent, very strong. And so, I just wanted to thank you for the presentation. So I know that this district offers so much more than, first of all, I think all these competencies are incredibly important. I think they've been important for decades. I know that it's important that they be taught to children beginning at a very young age, and adults as well who haven't had the benefit of it. I'm just wondering, and maybe you don't know, why so much of this now is being taught in school, in addition to everything else that we send our children to school for. So was it taught back in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and we just didn't talk about it being taught? It was kind of infused into the day, but we just didn't call it anything? Or is this something new because society has changed, much as with social media and the use of cell phones? Because this has a budgetary impact, right? There are only so many hours in the school day. We still have to teach academics, right? We still want our children to thrive academically, or whether it's academically or vocationally, whatever it is, we want their day devoted to the way that they are going to best thrive, hopefully when they go out into the world after K to 12, K to 12. So how does the day accommodate all this? Is it new stuff? Is it old stuff called by a new name?
Like most things, we don't explicitly teach something until New York State follows it. So this is coming from state ed. It's one of the few things I actually agree with from state ed as far as mandating it. And I think the trick and the challenge, not only from a financial standpoint, but as you said, there's only so much time in the day. How do you dedicate that time? And I think Maury showed some ways that we go about doing it. I'm going to try not to go off on a tangent too much because Sean and I were just speaking before. I think of all the things that our school district does, we can do a few things very well. This is the one thing that we need to do much better, And so whether we think we can, especially in this fiscal climate, it's very hard to do it. These skills at this point need to be explicitly taught at a very, very early age, and then to weave that in all the way until they leave, because these are all lifelong skills. It's not like, when they turn 18 or 17 if they leave, and go, okay, that's it. These are things that they will have, and it's really, I think, in many ways, and you could talk about Dan Coleman, been speaking about this for years with emotional intelligence. Whether we agree that EQ is more important than IQ, I think they're both just as important. But it's a superpower if you have both, if you're high in both areas. And the reality is that's why we speak about executive functioning skills, which I know was taught at the end, or not taught, it was spoken about in the end. If a student can't stay on task, if they're not organized, if an adult can't stay on task and they're not organized, if they don't have the ability to self-start something, to monitor what's happening internally, I don't care how smart you are, it's going to be very, very hard to do anything well. So to go back to, I know you had a couple of different questions to it. I think we have to think outside of the box as far as how we explicitly teach our students all of these things that we're talking about. Like most things in our, I shouldn't say most things, like some things in our district, it's happening very well in pockets. I think it depends on the teacher, I think it depends on the grade level, and I think quite frankly, it depends possibly on the administrator who leads into this or they don't lead into it. That was a very long answer. I don't even know if I answered your question, but this is something I really do believe. And it doesn't mean we have to spend more. We just have to think in a very different way how to get across how important this is. Like one thing that costs nothing, but I probably, it's being live streamed, be careful. I would love to see what would happen to our students and staff, quite frankly, if for one day we didn't use technology at all. One day. Like, would we spontaneously compose to the class? I don't know, maybe. But I would love to see, as a social experiment, what would happen for one day. And then to do a pre and post. How do you feel? It's like a lead up to it. Kids are talking about it with adults. And then a post. How did you survive? What are some of the things that you've learned? Because I think if we start with little things like that, and then students and adults can see how addicted we are, I threw this thing, it keeps coming back every time I throw it away. So I would love to try something like that and to see what happens, because this is not going away. Student anxious, being anxious, that's not going away anytime soon. Depression's not going away anytime soon. So this is just as important as academics.
It's interesting because I have in my draft folder, I have 2 articles, and one is about, everybody got an iPad and a Chromebook during the pandemic. Is it time to put them aside? But I haven't sent it to you yet. It's been there since 2021. And also about putting phones away while in school. Okay, so.
Can I add on, I know you don't have other questions, but to that point, I think there's also a parental education piece, and 2 things. Back in 2012, so this was before Instagram, before the, kids were signing up on that, with all of those. I did that experiment as a principal with our building, and we, no phones, and we did whole day, and then we had an evening discussion with parents and kids, and but that was 2012. It's a wholly different environment now. But I think that a lot of these skills and the struggles we're seeing kids, and Jonathan Nate speaks to it in his research, and I've mentioned this to parents for years now, it's by overprotecting kids in the real world and underprotecting them in the online world, right? So no filters, it's a wild, wild west if you've got your phone or your Chromebook, but don't you dare walk a block to your friend's house without them walking with you. But that's like the reality. And anyone who's, older than 50 here, my goodness, the stuff we roamed about, and, when the sun goes down, that's when you go home, right? And you weren't being tracked. So we're preventing, and even now, kids can't, in schools, we don't let them just go out and play. There's always got to be an adult monitoring. And I get it, there's a legal issue, safety because of lawsuits, but at home, they're not out there playing alone. It's all organized sports by and large, and it's dance at the dance studio, organized sport, chess with the chess team. So kids are missing an opportunity to resolve conflicts on their own, get angry with each other without an adult intervening, fix this for me. And that's preventing their own social emotional growth, because conflict is a fact of life. And yeah, it's those little conflicts on the playground that you start to learn how to deal with conflicts. When you get a little bruise and, move on, or you push me and you reconcile that. So, there are things, there's an education piece, I think, with parents where we can help kids with the SEL and let parents, many years ago, I remember a parent gave me, who was it, the blessing of the bruise in your skin. Right, that sort of mentality, it's okay, you know what, and sometimes it's okay to get a B or a B plus in a class, it's okay. Let's learn from it, and, by trying to prevent any conflict or any challenges, I think we're doing our kids a disservice, so.
Is any of that part of the SEL training? Meaning coping with failure, learning from mistakes, is that also, because I think in an academic sense, that's really important, especially for the highly competitive kids.
That's the resilience piece.
Yes.
That's the resilience piece, that's in our portrait of the graduate, I'm sorry, the notion of being resilient. And that's where, especially for our high achieving kids who have not experienced failure, when you get to college, they can get crushed if, what, you're rejecting me? I didn't make it with a 3% acceptance rate, and I was rejected, but I've never really failed at anything. It can be hard if you have not really experienced that sort of rejection or failure.
We're going to cope with that. So I'm sorry, we got off on a conversation, but how, I remember last year, a community member, after we were talking about SEL, said, can we use SUSA as a model? And I wrote it down, because I thought to myself, how do we measure SEL effectiveness? Because we know how to test for math, we know how to test for science, and art's more subjective. Is with these benchmarks, and I don't want to test a kid on
Why do you measure?
resilience, like how do you measure it? How do you know that you're reaching the students, given that this is so important? How do you know?
Theoretically, within our climate survey, the panorama survey, right, they have sections, modules related to connection to your school, which is an important part of SEL, and they also have about grit. Right, so that resilience and the perseverance piece. So the principals have that, they look at it. And, SUSA and, Ruler has its own measurements. So they use data from Ruler, and they've found success in the surveys they've given at SUSA. Hasn't expanded to the other schools, but SUSA has served as a model. Their model district-wide, not district-wide, I'm sorry, countrywide, and really, for the program internationally. And our schools have leaned on them. They do a lot of work with other schools over the summer, with summer curriculum development and learning to implement some of the Ruler initiatives they've had in place in other schools.
I have more questions, but I'm going to defer to you in case not, so we can have
Yeah, okay, so, I have a lot, but I'm gonna try and condense it. What I was waiting for, and then the big reveal was literally your last bullet, which makes me really, really happy, because for years we've seen piecemeal, we've seen schools do what they have found, and they've tried to train their teachers, and it's felt disconnected. And so it was thrilling to see rulers start to be rolled out at an elementary level and across the buildings. Of course, all the buildings are in different places, unfortunately, so we need time to grow. So seeing that consistency piece, I think was really, really critical. So developing a district SEL plan, I have in my notes, less is more, where we were throwing bubble gum at the wall, like looking for how we could address, this SEL piece and this strategy and that strategy. So I feel like that plan would be really, really fruitful. It's the consistency piece, et cetera. So I could go back to the phone thing just for a second. All the research is coming out. Two things on that. Middle school does not allow the phones during the day, correct? But the high school does. So just throw that bomb on the table and just let that sit there. It's executive functioning, right? The research is showing that it's impacting students' ability to focus. They constantly want to go to their phone, they want to go to their phone, they want to go to their phone. And their engagement in the classroom, their engagement with their peers, their engagement sitting in the commons, sitting in the cafeteria. So there's the phone is in the way of so much of our kids' emotional development and in their attentional and executive functioning development. So I just think that would be valuable to pursue and talk about. Can we do a book club on Jonathan Haid's book? I think that would be incredible.
Sure.
Some behavior management and token economy kind of stuff. How do we approach it in terms of the SEL? Is there a behavior management approach that we have as a district? Is there a behavior management approach in a particular building? Have we looked at that? Is it something we're familiar with?
So each building, I'm going to speak about the elementary level right now, and Weber does too with Weber Stars, but they each have their own PBIS, which is positive behavior intervention and support. So that's a universal support that is a joint effort between administration and counselors and the faculty. And they all, so I think I showed you that Charter Champions, the little ticket from SUSA earlier. So that's something that students get for being caught, those little tokens that they get, or the Guggenheim coins. So that's sort of the behavior management at the universal level. So every student has access to getting one of those, whether you're caught being kind or whatever the measurement is that the building has. We don't have a universal, there's PBIS in different ways in every building.
It's not standardized.
Not standardized. Thank you.
So here's my question, my follow-up question. What does the research show about behavior management and token economies? Do we know?
I mean, other than the articles that I've read, that it helps to promote school culture, I can't cite anything specific right now.
I'm not trying to steer
Right.
the conversation, but I've not seen like conclusions about how behavior management programs work and their effectiveness.
So they can work with students to help, again, build student engagement. Anytime a student feels valued or heard, that promotes, for any of our kids that maybe just had a rotten morning and comes in and then they're getting some, it definitely helps promote healthy self-esteem and community. And I love the example that I was given from Guggenheim, which I'm sure is happening in other places too, but when they get that token, they're encouraged to pay it forward, which I think says a lot for how students can really learn about, hey, it's great to feel valued and proud, but that doesn't just live within me. We can share that and have a whole community feeling. So I think the research is there to support it, but not as a standalone. So it has to work sort of within, like I showed you, that MTSS umbrella. So positive behavior, token economies live within that, just like RTI lives within that MTSS umbrella, and just like SEL lives. So all of these things sort of live within there. And then you've got your tiers. So those token economies, that's your universal, where everybody has an opportunity. And then if needed, it goes up.
I mean, token economy, so what we're talking about, I think of, an older type of philosophy. What I love about ruler is we're teaching kids how to identify their emotions and then to learn how to self-regulate. That to me is the ultimate behavior management plan. is for students to do that, so to explicitly teach students, I'm feeling X, on the quadrant, and then to say, all right, now I need to self-regulate, I need to figure out what's in my little tool belt, how to get me to a place where I could function and do well. That to me is 100 times more powerful than any chip, any thing that they may receive over time. Because again, I think because they're learning at such a young age, as they get older, that'll help them as adults. And that's why I think the challenge is because we have so many different types of programs within our respective schools. It's like at some point, I think we all need to be speaking the same language. You walk into Sousa, those students are speaking a very, very specific language, a very precise language. And that needs to be more uniform, in my own opinion.
Okay, one more, what I think is a big question. You talk about the MTSS and the tiers, tier 1 to tier 3. How is that, are you identifying students that need these various tiers through a child study team? What's the process? How does that happen?
So that is one way, so a child study team might be one way to identify a student that needs a tier 2 support. It sometimes even can come from a conversation that's taken, it can start with a teacher, it can start with a counselor, if the student has a conversation, and then it's determined that we need a social worker, or maybe, or maybe a psychologist. So, or if at an instructional study team at an IST, it's determined that we need to think about, is a referral to the CSE needed, so those are some of the ways that we might go up the tiers. It might come out of a referral from some teachers to say, I think, hey, you might be running a social skills group at Weber, and students are identified maybe for that tier 2 support. They would benefit from that additional support.
So an extension of that then is using rulers. As we said, some buildings are further along than others. Have we found that through maybe data that we have less students needing the tier 2 or the tier 3 based on how successful the rollout of ruler has been? And do we need behavior specialists less as a result? That's both a meeting student need and a financial question. So is there data that's showing that we have made progress through using ruler in terms of how our children are functioning daily in our buildings?
I think that the individual schools, each school probably has their own data. I'm sure that Sousa has data on how that's impacted their climate.
I think that's a challenge. I think we don't have the answer right now. I think it's and on top of that, this conversation, first of all, I'm glad we're having it. I think it's really important because the more questions that are asked, you're going to see that we won't have some of those answers. And that's part of the challenge. And that's part of our responsibility to make sure that we're doing more with what we have. The behaviors, I will say, because we employ quite a few within, and not just at the elementary schools, but, they're all over. The teachers, or not even the teachers, the educators are learning from the behaviors in as much as the students are benefiting from. So those are real explicit ways of working with kids and their practitioners. So the good news about behaviors, and at some point you would like to think, like any scaffolding, you remove it over time because we won't need it anymore. But right now, it's helping the students, it's helping the educators, but hopefully over time we won't need them as much as we do now, coupled with ruler, hopefully manifesting itself through all the others.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I could just add on, to Dr. Heinz's point, I don't think there's a single school that would say, we're good, we don't need our behaviorists, right? They need them, especially in the wake of, COVID and kids still learning how to do school. But I think that's a broader issue than what happened during the pandemic. I think it was just accelerated during the pandemic. It's something that was already happening. I think that from a district point of view, Mr. Director talked a little bit about MTSS, you brought that up, from an SEL point of view. Of course, MTSS from an academic point of view. In both of these areas, I think as a district, we are still learning exactly what that looks like. What does tier 1 look like? In theory, a tier 1 intervention is an intervention that's a whole class intervention. So those are skills both on the academic as well as the SEL side that we're working on with the classroom teachers to see, these are the sort of things you can do at a classroom level, academically, as well as in the SEL domain. So we talk about having MTSS, but we have a way to go in terms of actually having that in place to the point where we are, getting the data points, studying and tracking them, having a data dashboard so we can see how kids are progressing and answer those sort of questions. That's part of an MTSS framework. Ms. Director, myself, a lot of principals, some of our other administrators were part of a MTSS work group this past year. We had some teachers involved as well. So this is something that's important. I know in our PGCD, we've got a subcommittee looking at where RTI/MTSS fits in to our academics. So this is one of the initiatives as well. You get a lot of moving parts that fits in here, but it's got a much broader piece in our schools' lives.
And have the teachers and staff been responsive to this? Do they see the value? Is it just, oh, okay, we have to do this
Right.
now, or is it embraced and is there value seen in it, or is there?
So I think an important part in the way it needs to be
Mandate aside.
approached. Right, this isn't something on top of what you're doing. When done well, and that's never in the very beginning. Once it's up and running, it's taking the place of. So when you get these processes, procedures, and let's talk about it from an academic point of view for a few moments. If you've got good tier 1 intervention, and you've got that going, well, all of a sudden, kids, you've got as a whole class, you've got fewer pullouts to go to a tier 2 or a tier 3 intervention. It all pays off at the end. So initially, yeah, it's more to do because you have to learn what are those interventions, but part of the training is here's where it saves you time. And if you've got fewer outbursts in your classroom because the kids are learning to self-regulate more, that's good for your classroom instruction and that saves you time. So we've got to look at it not as in addition to, but here's how it's saving you. It can replace you having to pull that kid out in the hallway maybe and talk and say, whatever it might be.
It's interdisciplinary, right, in a lot of ways. So we have two things. We'd like to get to old business and then to board and community.
No
Are
more
we good
questions
with
on
this?
SEL?
We'll get to the
New
community.
business.
Did I say,
You said old business and new business.
what's new business?
So we were talking
Old business.
about?
Wasn't this the new business?
This is new business,
Okay.
yes. So are we good with this? Okay, so in terms of old business, we've been trying to do this throughout the year. Sometimes we have time, sometimes we don't. Old business, we planned on talking about where we are in our literacy initiatives. That was something that this committee covered 2 years ago, and I think even last year. And specifically, if we can talk about how we plan to address the needs of our most at-risk readers, if we are moving away from reading recovery and what that looks like.
So, right, no, literacy has been a topic of, I've probably spent most of my time, efforts, and a lot of ours, certainly the grant funds we got on literacy, right? I think that is foundational. As we've discussed, there, I use the term pockets of excellence, but there's not a consistent curricular approach to literacy across the 5 buildings. And K-12, especially with our reading program, we've looked at some of the challenges some of our high school students and middle school students, and we're not serving our kids as well as we should. I don't think we're doing as an effective job monitoring, doing progress monitoring, tracking where they are. So kids are coming through without the skills, especially in reading, that are necessary for success. So that's the K-12, the pre-K-12 perspective we've been looking at, and meeting with the English chair, with at the high school, with the middle school principal, and teacher leaders, as well as the elementary folks. So our PGCD committee, which is the committee district-wide that looks at curriculum changes, we put in place a subcommittee to look at early literacy, and pre-K through 2, and they have been meeting again. Concurrent with that has been a meeting of our RTI subcommittee, response to intervention. That's where the MTSS protocol would list. I'm very excited about some of the work that's being done with that committee, with the teachers and the administrators, especially Ms. Diaz, Dr. Porcella, who have led that, and our teachers who have taken it very seriously, to the point where developing standard criteria across all schools for what constitutes the need. Okay. What does Tier 1 intervention look like? That was done. What constitutes the need for Tier 2 intervention? What constitutes the need for Tier 3? How long do kids stay on those? How do you track data? What does it look like? Who's responsible for that? So that committee is working on that, and that was a big part of our work on our recent superintendent's conference day. Concurrently, as I said, we've got our pre-K2 early literacy committee, which is looking into, as I think I've shared with this committee, we brought in a lot of resources to teachers over the course of the last 18 months, from Haggerty to foundations to Wi-Fi, a lot of different programs to look at. We've seen much more consistency, but the result of this committee will be the recommendation probably over the course of next year of a consistent program at all 5 schools, pre-K through 2, for early literacy. We're already seeing the training, professional development on the science of reading fact foundation of all of our teachers. We've had one of our professional developments this year was all about the science of reading K-12. So we've done that at the district. We've got folks looking at this and providing some professional development. So I'm excited that we will get that consistency. We're going to get it in mathematics as part of our new mathematics program that's coming into place, K-6 for next year. And we'll have it for our early literacy as well in the foundational years. So I know that there's been conversation or a comment or a question about it at a board meeting. I've been asked about it. This concern about reading recovery. Are we getting rid of reading recovery? What's going to happen to reading recovery? So reading recovery is an intervention that has been used for the last 24, 25 years in the school district. Reading recovery is a Tier 3 intervention. The recommendation for Tier 3 interventions is really that it should be used for about 2 to 5% of your population. Now, reading recovery is only for first graders. So if you figure at a school that you're only supposed to have 2 to 5% receiving this Tier 3 intervention, and you've got a first grade class of, say, 80 to 90 kids, how many kids should be receiving reading recovery? Theoretically, you should not be hitting more than 4 kids, right? We've had upwards of 16 kids receiving reading recovery. Reading recovery, it's intensive, it's one-to-one, it takes place over 16 to 20 weeks, only for first graders. So it is you invest a lot in it. Now listen, to get kids up to speed reading, you put in the money you have, but these are not unlimited resources. So the question is, why are we jumping all of these kids 4 times, 5 times as many kids as one would suggest to a tier 3 intervention. Why? Because we don't really have a tier 1 and a tier 2 intervention in place, and they're jumping over. So key to addressing our weakness at a tier 3 level is to strengthen our tier 1, tier 2 intervention. So reading recovery, we need to make sure that following the state guidelines, right, 2 to 5%, no, we should not be serving 16 kids in reading recovery. That's too many. We've messed up somewhere when we're jumping to that. So we're going to be far more mindful of that. We have found that we can serve our kids, and when we've looked at our data, when we've had those reading teachers using small group instruction, 4 to 5 kids, they've had effective results as well. As effective, if not more so, than reading recovery. So we're confident that by reducing our reliance on reading recovery, more aligned with, the 2 to 5%, not only does that then free up the reading recovery teachers to do more group, small group instruction and support in reading, which will provide more of our kids with reading support, we'll be able to certainly provide even better support. So that's sort of the concern about reading recovery. We had a nice meeting with the reading recovery teachers to try to, and I get it, they're dedicated, they've done a fantastic job, they've been trained, they're professionals, and they take it very seriously. And their focus is first grade. And when we shared a K-12 focus, they had a better understanding of what we have seen in terms of what's coming out of our elementary schools and from those schools and beyond, and how we really have to get more of a structure and systems in place where we're doing progress monitoring and we're doing more effective tier 1, tier 2 interventions, and we're supporting more kids because kids are coming out without the necessary support in reading, and we'll be able to do that moving forward.
So the state has this, is it called the Science of Reading? There's a whole
Well, that's the
initiative.
proposal for the governor, correct?
And so right now it's in the proposal stage. So I guess you tell me if you should wait to answer the question. I'll ask the question. How does that currently impact what we're doing in Port Washington? Are we going to need to revamp
It
everything?
doesn't
Or should we wait and
impact,
see?
no, it doesn't impact, because everything we have done, both our professional development, any materials that have been brought in since I've arrived here, have all been based on the science of reading. So, that said, as you asked.
I said I could wait to see if it happens.
Okay, then I'm not the answer. Keep everyone on the field. But there is one of the controversies with reading recovery is that it's still using an older 3Q system, which is not based on the science of reading. So until we have folks trained in a proper tier 3 science of reading based intervention, we're not quite ready to throw everything out. Let's make sure we have the training because we need a tier 3 intervention.
So stay tuned.
Rachel?
So I'm gonna speak first as a parent, because I've been a SUSE parent for a decade at this point. And I think that you've both touched on this, but I think the success of the program at SUSE is that it is embedded at this point. And that's not just about having the kids be trained well, it's about the adults, right? It's a different way of functioning for the adults, and I think fortunately or unfortunately, right, the adults, most of us were not raised with any sort of social emotional intelligence, right? Nobody was telling us to assess our own feelings. And so it's something that the adults have to learn to effectively roll it out for the kids. And ideally, you get to the point where I think SUSE is, where it's in the air in the building, it's the entire way of operating, it underlies everything, and it's making the kids and the adults better for it. So it's not, like Deborah alluded to, okay, we did math, and now we're gonna do SEL. Or, this is the day where we think about SEL. right? This is the month where we think that SEL. No, it's just there all the time. And I think for parents who aren't in the detail as much, you may not even realize it's happening. But I'll give you an example from my own life. I had a particularly frenetic morning this morning, like parents often have, and a particularly frenetic week and early sports practice. And I'm throwing stuff in lunch boxes and I'm going, shoes, shoes, shoes. And from behind me, I hear my 7-year-old and she says, okay, so you're in the yellow. Where do you think Dad is? And I turn around and she's at the fridge and she's putting a magnet to represent me in the yellow on her mood meter chart, which by the way, I did not put on the fridge. She put on the fridge when it came home in her backpack. And then she grabbed other magnets to decide they were the mood meter and now she charts us. And she's calm, right? Like, okay, mom's having a moment. I know she's in the yellow and I'm gonna deal with it this way. It's a really healthy thing we've done. So the question is, I think probably, and Dr. Hines, I think you know what's coming. 3 years ago, maybe 4, maybe 5 years ago, we had a conversation as a board and talked about consistency and rolling out Ruler district-wide. And I don't know that Ruler is like the perfect best SEL program, but it's been rolled out really well here, and we decided it would be better to go with Ruler than have this piecemeal system, because then we're all talking the same language. We have elementaries being able to collaborate. They're also all feeding into Weber, and so you have honestly a little bit of a shock to the system when you have kids who are coming from different levels of or just different, I won't even say levels, like they have different language coming in, and then middle school uses a different language too. And we talked about, and I think funded, rolling it out district-wide, but I'm not seeing that on our update on all of the elementary schools and Weber and Schreiber. Are we still planning to do that? I mean,
We're
what's
not
the
planning,
status?
it's happening, and you may recall, if you look back at the 4 minutes,
Yeah.
you know, we spent a significant amount of money to bring a new team daily, because we have, of course, our new principal. She's in her 2nd year. She brought a team, and you know, it was over $10,000 we spent to get them trained up at Ruler. It was a exhilarating experience, and they've come back energized, and that coupled with the language of the restorative practices that many of them also did. So that was the one school daily that was a little behind. Now Manor Haven had a tune-up training this year as well. So those are the 2 schools that were a little behind in terms of the training. I mentioned that we had a lot of summer curriculum writing, so we were putting that money into, led by SUSA, to here's how you integrate it into your math programs, this and that, because you're right, it's integrated in. You know, hey, it's SEL time, it's Ruler time. No, it's, and here's how you do it. So SUSA is helping the other schools, and those experts at SUSA are helping the other schools implement it in. So it's Ruler. We are a Ruler district at the elementary school level.
Okay, good. I knew the SUSA team had been to some of the schools, but I didn't realize that it was that global at this point. And I think then the next step is like pulling it up to Weber too, because if you have an adult who doesn't have the same framework, and the kids who have a different framework, it still doesn't
So
work.
this is what Ms. Director was trying to get at with the presentation. I think at the secondary level, we're going to focus and implement the restorative practices. So there's a symbiosis between those 2, and there are other districts that are Ruler Elementary and restorative at the secondary, and they are so compatible. The language is very similar. Ruler has, right now, the way we've implemented it is far more focused on the language of the emotions, helping kids learn that whatever state you're in right now, that's not where you're gonna be forever, and that's okay, right? You know, mom was in yellow, but she's gonna move on at some point, and let's just try to avoid mom in the red, right? That's the worst place to be, but kids recognize these are all temporary, and that's really helping. So, you know, but Ruler also has a piece of that we're starting to implement at SUSA about the consequences, and that mirrors the restorative practices. So that's where we're heading as a district. And next year, you know, and I think Ms. Director mentioned this as well, additional training of you know, we've got 24 adults who are trained in restorative practices and can be turnkey trainers. We're going to bring in the same trainer to do more training for upwards of 50 adults, not to be necessarily turnkey, but here's how you can implement it. And that will reverberate throughout. Within 3 days of the end of the training, I was in 4 different classrooms that were using circles, restorative circles. So the principals have just gobbled this up. They've loved it. And, you know, it's been up to high school as well as elementary. The high school has been very active in
That's great.
restorative circles.
I forgive me, I neglected to, Dr. Block wanted to bring up something else before we go to the community comments.
Okay, so one thing that we talked about in many curriculum committee meetings is the whether there is planning by the teachers and like whether there's a formal document that the students can see or that the administration sees as to what they're doing in each class, certainly at the secondary level. So I brought this up when it related to core extension, and you know, the conclusion was that we don't have those documents, right? And then I just wanted to tie that into the fact that you know, Deb, you were at the Shriver meeting with me last maybe 2 weeks ago
Round table.
at the Rains Inn, and you were there. Yes, so we were there.
That means there was principal and lots of students, and we were guests.
So, yeah, we saw one very clear theme that virtually all of these students asked for, which was, I don't know whether I have a test in 2 weeks or not.
2 weeks.
Well, yeah, so the teacher would tell them you have a test Friday or you have a test in 2 days or whatever it is, but they had no way to know, and they were all set asking for the ability to plan better, recognizing that they have sports, and sometimes when they have sports, they know they have hours and hours of practices, and maybe they would write a term paper earlier in the semester or something like that. And so I guess my question for my fellow committee members is, are we interested in asking Dr. Feeney to put together what it would take to get the secondary schools and maybe in a slowly rolling out way to provide that to the students at the start of the quarter or at the start of the school year. So it's really for Deb and for Nan, and then, you know, if you guys agree, then it would be for Dr. Feeney.
It's interesting that you mentioned it because I walked away from that roundtable and the students had prepared a summary of all the topics that they wanted to discuss in advance, and so I still have this on my desk on my to-do list. And it seemed to me that they were talking to the board about things that were really within the principles. Because I thought to myself, what can we as a board do? It was really about the functioning of the high school and the principal and her staff and organization issues and detail issues at the high school. And I thought maybe we as a group, the three of us, should write a letter to Dr. Bear and say thank you very much. What are your next steps? Because I don't know if as a board, I mean, I love the fact you brought it up, because it's been on the back of my mind. I don't know if it's something as a board we say this needs to be implemented, or that we go through our chain of command through Dr. Hines and Dr. Feeney to say to Dr. Bear, what are you doing with the information that the students provided? Has it just, because that's a building, right? It's a building level kind of.
So it's not a
syllabus.
secondary
A syllabus
issue.
There are 2 things, if I can.
Yeah,
I think, and you talk about SEL, letting kids know what their schedule looks like, my goodness, yes.
They talked about
At a
that.
minimum.
And
Yeah, they said it creates anxiety.
Right.
they talked about it.
But you brought up, there are 2 issues, right? This notion of, hey, here's what I'm teaching in this course, a syllabus, and here's what's going to happen. And yes, that was missing in core extension, and teachers have already started working on it. That was actually part of our work, and that was, you know, the result. Yeah, we absolutely should know what's being taught in that class. I mean, that is, and it should be communicated and posted. That is nothing, that is not unreasonable at all. So, and teachers certainly at Weber were working on that. The other issue is, you know, because I can, hey, here's my syllabus, here's what I'm gonna do year 1, blah, 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 and I can give that to you as a parent and even as a student. but that doesn't necessarily give the details of, oh yeah, Tuesday you got a quiz, and then Friday we're doing a big test. And I'm not gonna let you know the day before, I'm gonna let you know a week at a time, which certainly as adults, I would never drop, hey, you've got this big thing due tomorrow, get it to me in the morning, right? I mean, we don't operate like that with each other, and we shouldn't operate like that with kids. So that's a little different than the syllabus, and I think that is in some ways cultural, and I think that's a conversation we should have with our teachers in terms of, hey, let's talk about SEL, we think this is important, here's what you as a teacher can do. Don't drop a Google Classroom assignment at 3:30 in the afternoon telling kids they've got 50 pages to read when they might be at the first of 2 practices that night and won't get home so late.
They actually talked about the benefit of the team approach at Weber because they all know the schedule and they don't overwhelm their students because they know where things are going to land. But they're not finding that at the high school. And
More of a
my
side
sense
of
was
the high
that
school.
Katie heard it loud and clear. I felt like it was something that she was paying attention to.
And
So,
love the fact that you brought it up.
so if that is the case, this seems like something that can improve students' lives. It shouldn't take that long to do, so when should we expect like an update on how that is going? And maybe what I would love to see is some samples. Here's, like, here's the new stuff that we are providing to students. And I'm not looking for anything in a month, like, I think September would be fine, October would be
I
fine.
was gonna say May 1st, but if
Yeah.
you're.
That would also be fine, but I think September would be fine, but that
That's
sounds like a
reasonable.
well on. Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Or even just knowing that the staff has communicated to the teachers that these kids are stressed, and they are, every single child at that table, and there were, 10, there was a very large group from all different, I want to say, just walks of life in the high school, representing all different groups of the high school, really a diverse group in every single way. They were unanimous in, we want to be successful in high school. We want to do the work. We're not trying to shy away from the work. We just need to know what's expected of us. And why is that so much to ask? Basically, it was these very mature, self-aware students were saying.
Dr. Bear and I talked about this, and I think it's great that kids were willing to speak to all these fancy adults. However,
They're very
my
handy.
previous district, the real power came when I brought a panel of kids like that in front of the faculty. You don't need to hear it. The teachers need to hear it.
That would be great.
And that's why I said
That's a great idea.
building.
Good. Okay. We got the list.
We're gonna move to community comments.
thank you.
Ms. Jaffe?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask you, what do you have for elementary level students with dyslexia? Is it in any way, are there any ways to sort of catch it early and evaluate it? And what is there for them in terms of struggles with reading?
Right, so that would be part of, certainly with Dr. Allen and her team, I mean, the teachers are trained to identify where there might be problems. So that's where that would fit in. So, talk about different interventions that they've gone through, tier 1, tier 2, and you've identified that, maybe they need to be classified with some educational testing. That's what that would fit in. So more within the PPS than Dr. Allen's doing.
How many students with dyslexia do we have?
I don't know offhand, I'm sorry.
Do we have any?
Oh, for sure, yeah, for sure.
And do they typically go under special ed, or
Yeah.
are they?
Yes,
And what grade would you typically encounter?
I don't know offhand, that's where Dr. Allen would be probably a little more knowledgeable about the timing, where it gets caught.
So AS and so what tier intervention is that for reading?
Typically, the reading would be a tier 1 or a tier 2.
For AS,
Yeah.
so how many kids do we have in
We have-
AS?
We have 4 reading teachers at Weber, so they're providing services to kids there.
That was just what elementary.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That was, but really, any of the elementary schools, I'm just curious, because we did talk about how our is tier 3, and that's supposed to be 2 to 5% of the population, but I do know that there also is AS.
If you email us, we can get you those numbers. We don't have them all.
Yeah, I don't have, this wasn't necessarily a presentation on that, so I don't have those numbers on hand.
Ms. Porter?
Thank you. I just want to go back to the secondary level and what the experiences that I've seen with that, and I think it really speaks to social emotional learning. And I really understand, you spoke with those students at that meeting, and I really, because I speak to other parents and children, yes, it is a high school, I mean, it is a high school issue, but what I found, even from my experience last year, I mean, this year has been a great experience with that, but is that they're within the same department. So for example, we're talking about, I'm just giving an example, English 9, ninth grade. Everybody has a different way of how they're grading the students. And so it's not even, I'm not even talking about content. So you can have a teacher who in a quarter will only give 3 assessments. And according to the board grading policy, it has to be multiple ways for students to achieve success in the classroom. So when a student in teacher A's classroom is getting a B+, because it depends on maybe 3 assessments, and the validity of those 3 assessments, could be also into question, especially if a third of the class is based on multiple choice tests. And so that's a real issue, and that is across the board. And even the syllabus that some teachers, I would say most do give a syllabus, but they might not include a grading policy. And again, it doesn't really matter if it's the luck of the draw. You could have AP World History this year, and one teacher will give you multiple assessments, another teacher will give you 2 for the whole quarter. And what you'll find is, and I think guidance experiences this, and you know exactly who the teachers are, because September comes, and immediately you'll have 8 to 10 kids want to drop out of that teacher's classroom. And that happens regularly, probably with that teacher. And so there's no grading policy by actual subject. And that's unfair, because then it affects GPA, it affects that kid dropping out. If they only had that other teacher, parents calling up who are in the know to say, don't give my call and guidance, say, don't ever give me that teacher again, and the rest of me. So that has to be taken, yes, on the building level. But again, the problem on the building level, because I did have a meeting with the AP last year about this, is that some APs are not on board with this. When I showed the AP the examples, this teacher, the whole quarter, 12 weeks, gave 3 assessments. And even I questioned the quality of those assessments, while this other teacher, when I got from other parents exactly what they did that quarter in the grade book, and they were like 14 assignments, 15 assignments in that quarter, and the AP wasn't on board. The AP was, well, that's the teacher's prerogative. I don't find that is the teacher's prerogative. So, I mean, to put the pressure on Dr. Baer to solve this problem, it's not going to solve it, because maybe members of our team are not on board with solving this problem. Okay, maybe the chair people are not on board with solving the problem. So it really requires some intervention on the part of the board, I believe, because you can't have these miracle workers coming in. Yes, they're wonderful having, Dr. Feeney here, Dr. Baer, but it really requires movement from the board to say, this is what we want. I'm not asking the English teachers to all be teaching the same books, but it's not fair when my kid, but I'm a parent in the know, I'll call up guidance and say, please, I will never have that teacher again. I will do that. My kid's GPA will be higher than somebody else, and that kid will drop out, and the parents will not know. So there's a real issue here, and I don't feel it's addressed by just saying, give it to Dr. Baer and let her know about it. Because she needs a team, and she needs the board support. And you guys know that this has been going on because your kids have been in the district. I've had personal conversations with all of you. You're fully aware that this is going on, and now I'm inheriting it. I'm inheriting it. My friends are suffering. They're calling me up. Rose, what do I do in this social studies class? Rose, what do I do here? Rose, what do I do this? Because I've been in education, so I know.
Okay.
So I'm just saying, I don't see the board really stepping up and doing something about this. And I'm now in second year, and now I'm worried about what I'm going to deal with next year. I've had a great year with my son's teachers. I was the lucky one this year, not last year, but this year.
Okay, there's so many other people, and so I feel like we heard what your message was.
But I wanna know what's gonna be done.
Okay,
I
so-
want the board, I
I
want to
hear you.
hear it. I want to hear what direction are you going to give your administrators,
Okay,
especially the APs who are not on board with it, and the chair people who are not on board with it.
okay.
I just wanted to
Yes,
say
go
on the agenda, on the wish list for the policy committee was to do a review of the grading policy, the fidelity of the grading policy and the homework policy, because they're relatively new policies. And unfortunately, we had a lot of things intervening, mandated policies and things that
They
came
have
in.
to teach
but
us
it
in
is-
class, you
it
have
is-
to have the same
Okay,
grading
thank you.
policy. I
I
don't know how
understand.
much I have
Yes.
to repeat that.
Thank you. So we will, are you saying that we will go back to that?
It's been on our wish list
Yes.
all year. We
And
keep
multiple
scanning.
assessments, multiple assessments.
Okay, thank you. Sandra?
Thank you. Sorry, my phone closed. Okay, so I have two questions. With SEL, so I've also been discussing this for 4 years now, and I did take the necessary steps as far as I first assessed the building, classroom, what is the building do for SEL, the psychologist, then to the principal, and at some point within 4 years ago, I started attending board meetings that I heard about Ruler. And the implementation continuously gets brought up, but I'm in year 4 now with my kids in 2 different buildings, and I haven't necessarily seen the more important part of Ruler with the part that Heinz mentioned. I have seen the token component of it, which I do appreciate more recently in this year, but just an update on where the buildings are. I think it was last year, there was an update possibly on like where the buildings are and which year they are, but I didn't really get a sense of where we're at right now. I also thought there was a pause on it, just based on this presentation. So just an update, and I don't expect answers right now, just an update on which building is at where with Ruler, because they do have their tiers with it. Part of that would be really, I didn't see any update with staff. So for Mark Brackett, the first like 15 pages of his book, which is the only pages I can get through, is the adults. It's not what the kids learn, it is the adults in his life. So while this was great, I didn't really understand the update that the staff and administration are getting when it comes to SEL. So just an update on where it is with staff and professional development, even with the implementation of Ruler. Secondary level, it specified the health and mental health, the health teachers and the mental health team, but it did not specify anyone else when it came to SEL. Just those 2 groups of people who, if you have health class, it's great, Trevor, I think you said it, or was whoever, that you get it twice. That's it, right? And it's great if you are one of the individuals seeking out mental health. But at the secondary level, I didn't hear about the rest of the staff. So that was one of just an update on that. And just a really quick comment on social media. So Parent University did happen for the elementary schools, and I did bring it up to the organization they used there, but they also did a social media component this year. They didn't do it last year. So this year for elementary, they also have a social media part that you can choose to attend. And with that, this is more of a comment, and I made it to them, is there is a lot of feedback on the negatives of social media. That training was about the negatives of social media and the parent training for it. I heard a principal in a different meeting mention the same need of parent training on social media, more in a negative context, but I did recently attend a Nassau County PTA conference where they emphasized the importance of understanding the positive of social media. This is like the culture of like the old suits telling me something's bad as a kid, where it's that mentality of like understanding the positive community that social media does build and the outlet that a lot of youth need that community. So that vendor is focused on that. I brought it up. Not much dialogue on that. And then it kind of sounded like that was discussed here with the parent training of it, which I think is also important, but I haven't heard anything on like a positive part of that end.
Just because it's under, piggyback off of you, that's okay. At the secondary level, we also had a cyber parent university where Lori Director was there, and we did actually do a two-part. It was the safety, the dangers, as well as the positive uses of social media, because, I'm going to segue into the phone conversation. There's always been in history a point where if you take something away from a generation, they're going to say, no, we want it more, right? Anyone reads the code, will know that's what we said every single time. So it's not necessarily our role, I think this is a perfect personal statement, that we try to take something away from students that are going to be independent in less than 4 years of time. And then they're going to go to universities, and they're going to have to learn how to manage this and effectively executive function with the tool that they're going to need. And I think I'm very, very excited that executive functioning is included in the budget, and that your phone as a tool at school is something that the kids, it's part of their social emotional learning, right? They're going to be gone, and they need to learn how to use this tool in a healthy and balanced way, and it can be a tool. So can social media be a tool as more and more admissions officers are looking at social media sites of their students that are applying to their schools, that encouraging students to use LinkedIn and professional sites that are also part of social media. So I don't know necessarily think that it's let's just take away the phone, because tell a 17-year-old you can't have a phone, and just visualizing that down, but maybe it's, okay, these are the health benefits. So I do know that the health classes, and again, maybe this is the pockets of excellence part, that they do talk about and role play different social media situations and cyberbullying and what that looks like. The question I have is, as part of the executive function, I'm hoping that it will be, again, the same, talking about uniformity of language, like when it is implemented in 3rd grade, 6th grade, and 9th grade, that we're all, that all buildings and all levels are speaking the same uniform language. Because teaching kids how to use their time and value and self-regulate of their time and priorities and long-term, short-term goals, hopefully that grows into the 6th grade using the same language. Like where do you see yourself in 6th grade? Where do you see yourself in 9th grade? I just want to add that as part of the social emotional learning component. And in terms of data analysis, I think a lot of studies have shown that if you include social emotional learning, academics improves. That's your data, right? Not just behavior, but academics and their overall sense of their self-worth, right? So maybe not looking at it from the perspective of this one single lens of how do we isolate SEL quality, but maybe we look at it in terms of, let's look at our program to graduate and how they've improved as an overall human being.
Thank you. I just want to know, is there a parent component to Roller Rate that we could use and support Roller at home?
So, one of the things that SUSA has put in place was parent night, parent ruler night. And it modeled for parents, here's what it's all about. Parents could walk out of there with different activities and how they could support it. So they could, and it was modeled by kids. So you go into this evening, this night, at all different stations, kids are there, the adults are there. So that was a great way. And I think we've got other schools. This is the 2nd year they've done it, SUSA, and they do it in the fall. And we have other schools that will be looking to implement that as well.
Okay, yeah, just kind of piggybacking off what Sandra said, it'd be good to get an update from high school. We don't really touch it on.
What school is that?
We're at Daly.
Yeah.
And my kid's also not telling me a lot of stuff that's happening either.
So Daly is really proud of, all the schools are wonderful, but in terms of ruler implementation, Daly's behind the efforts. And that's the team that went just 2 months ago for the intensive training. So they spent superintendent's conference day planning out, okay, now that we've done this, what are the next steps? So you'll hear more about ruler, maybe not so much in these remaining several weeks, few months of the school year, but certainly moving forward.
Thank you. I have a comment and a question. First, the comment, I've said it before, I'll say it again, I'll say it louder for all the folks in the back. Our district needs the support of social workers at the elementary level. The needs are increasing. We saw what the teams look like at the secondary levels, and that's wonderful. Those teams exist there for a reason. The needs are the same at the elementary level. And it is not fair to our guidance counselors to expect them to do that work, or to our social workers at Weber who then catch those down the road. So it's a different skill set, it's different expertise. We don't expect our school psychologists to do work with guidance counselors, to do work with a social worker. But at the elementary school, we have that expectation. And at this point, it is no longer reasonable to expect that our guidance counselors can do that work, or that our community outreach leadership can do that work either, no matter how well organized and well intentioned those groups are. So I'll get off that soapbox. My question is, since Dr. Feeney raised the judgment light book, he had 4 key recommendations, 2 of which, spoiler alert, 2 of which the school districts can do absolutely nothing about. And 2 we touched on, the phone-free schools, won't get into that. The 4th one, we touched upon it in terms of resilience, coping with failure, that sort of thing. But what he really suggests is more opportunity for independent, real-world responsibility. We have these wonderful programs that are focused on building self-esteem and encouraging self-confidence. We've talked about this before as well. Those are outcomes. They are not skills that can be taught. They are outcomes of feeling capable, of knowing, believing you can do hard things because you have done hard things. So I would love to know, what can we do as a district, perhaps baked into curriculum, baked into the school day at no cost, to encourage kids and families to partner and take more responsibility. He talks about the Let Grow program, which is free. Not Let Play Grow, which is a wonderful program, a great club, I think at SUSA, and I hope we'll see the expansion of that in coming years. But as we look at budget struggles, and we look at budget neutral ways to expand our kids' emotional capability to build confidence, what can we do? How do programs like that or others that are like that take hold? Where do they start?
Yeah, answer, all right.
Please.
So Lenore Skenazy, who's referenced in that book, she actually came here 4 years ago, and she met with the administrators, the older crop of administrators. I should say the ones who are no longer here. In my previous district, what we did K through 8 was 1 day a week. The only homework assignment a child had was to do something new and different that they've never done before. And then to write about it and articulate it in any way that they wanted to the rest of the class. And I don't mean like I did my laundry or, well, maybe that's a big deal.
Yeah, there's a what?
But I am telling you, it's free. You mentioned cost. The return of that investment was so significant. I don't know if it's there anymore, but at that point, we had 8th graders who never walked to the deli or went down the street and did something, mowed somebody else's lawn, or even mowing lawn for that matter. The hardest part of trying to operationalize that, you know where I'm going, was to have everybody buy in to say, this is the only homework assignment we're gonna have for the day. And telling people what to do, meaning the adults. That was the biggest challenge. It does not mean that we can't beta test this, because we have that in one class at SUSA right now, where that's part of what they do. So I would love to see us move in that direction. I spoke to Lenore about 2 weeks ago, and I'm bringing her back to speak to the administrators over the summer. Oh, now you guys know. So that is the first step, is to not convince, but to educate the administrators, and then in turn to have those conversations with the faculty. I love that. And we actually filmed some of the footage as far as when kids were sharing out with the rest of the class. It wasn't the kids who learned the most, it was the parents. The parents were blown away by how much we bubble wrap them, how much we don't think they can turn on an oven or a stove and cook or use a knife or, to do stuff. So that is the direction I'd like to see us go.
So we could piggyback and make it like a social media assignment, right? They have to post whatever they did, right?
That's good.
Bring it
So-
up.
Except they're not supposed to be co-pilot, 13 years ago.
And, you know, we talk a lot about partnership with families and partnership with parents. And partnership in terms of homework is not expecting your parent to help your kid make a diorama
That's
of
right.
the Middle Ages on a Tuesday night when the thing is done on Wednesday, right? Partnership is having a conversation with your kid and your kid's teacher about what independent responsibility looks
That's
like. And as a parent, I don't think there's anything better in the world than seeing that your kid can do something independently with autonomy and feel good about it. So these are the kinds of things that I would love to see take hold.
Okay, as usual, we are late again, so sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you again.
I waited to the end. So I have a question about Weber Middle School, and you speak specifically the 6th and 7th grade with health curriculum, because that's when they're taking health class. But I really want to understand how the concepts that are taught in 6th and 7th grade are carried through into the 8th grade curriculum, into the classroom. Do we have leadership type of program for 8th grade similar to how we have in 5th grade for the elementary schools? And, you know, other than walking up to Schreiber and, you know, doing some of those orientation things that we do to get them ready for 9th grade, what are we doing with them in 8th grade to get them ready for potentially the larger workload or the stress that they might encounter in 9th grade that they are not experiencing in 8th grade? So you don't have to answer that now, but that's what I want to understand.
Okay, I'm still, George.
Just very quickly, first of all, I want to thank you, Dr. Watt, for bringing those very conversation. But I think that we have lost recently civility. God knows that is going to be even lost even further. It's the way we adults treat each other. Our kids will pick up on that. Recently, a few days ago, the Wall Street had an article about how the line to bring your kids to school every morning is going into warfare. Parents fighting each other, flipping the finger, going over loans, not everywhere. And they cite several cases, one in Arizona where two moms pulled guns on each other because they cut the line of going. And the superintendent is trying to tell them, you gotta get up early, including the parents. You gotta be early, you can't be fighting to deliver your kids. I think that translates into how kids treat each other. If they see me behaving in such a barbaric way, hey, that's okay. And I think that's the elephant in the room. We don't want to talk about it because some parents will feel, well, don't tell me about it. You know, I do very well. I know that I always tell my son, I don't care if you disagree with teachers, you're respectful. You don't embarrass them, you don't question them. You can have a personal conversation. You do not engage in any behavior that is disruptive or you wouldn't. He has to go to the bathroom. I said, you do your best to engage the bathroom citizens that that live there and have their own little society. So I said, they're part of the diversity. So you have to just keep to yourself and don't engage them. So this is what you tell kids. But when kids feel privileged and entitled, they will say whatever they want to say, whenever they want to say.
Okay, now, I'm so sorry. Again, we're very, very late. I thank you. We always have the most wonderful conversations, and thank you for the presentation. And enjoy the parade. We have our next meeting is going to be on May 31st, and it will be the E&L review. Thank you. Have a wonderful break, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's
You're gonna enjoy.
your directions where I'm.
Ms. Mora? Stick to one side. Have a great day.
Yes. you-